How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite weekly horoscope, this time for August 16th through August 21st of 2021. We have a huge week ahead of us, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. We start this week off with Venus ingressing into Libra. Just right off the bat, this week really starts off, I don't remember if I actually mentioned this in last week's video. If I didn't, I meant to. But as pretty much the second Venus enters Libra, to the second Venus leaves Libra, you really want to soak in as much as that benefic energy as you possibly can. This is really like the really peak of the year in a lot of certain ways. So try to enjoy Venus in Libra. Anyway, it starts this week. And we have, starting on Monday, actually, let me pull up the chart. Starting on Monday, starting this week off with, yes, of course, Venus is going to be ingressing into Libra. The moon's also going to be in Sagittarius on the south node, though, making that square to Mercury and Mars. Now that we're coming off of that new moon in Leo, and now that the moon's gaining a little bit of light, right? It's making that quarter phase. It's on the south node, squaring Mercury and Mars. Maybe a certain ideal that we had, or a certain vision that we had, or a certain belief that we had isn't really working anymore. Again, this is a theme that's been repeated time and time again with the south node in Sagittarius. But now with the moon making a square to Mercury and Mars in Virgo is, very rational thought, very precise thought. It's very exact thought, very exact, communication as well. Very direct communication, very clear communication. And I think as the moon squaring Mercury and Mars, maybe some of the information that you're hearing or some of the information that you're getting is kind of just going against what not everything's good news. And I think the moon and Sag is like, come on, don't be a Debbie Downer. But Mercury and Mars is squaring moon where it's like, it's like, sorry, like that's not the truth. Sorry, that's not reality. So I think there's this mental frustration. There's a lot of, when we get into all of these, mutable stuff, it's like mental gymnastics. So it's mentally frustrating, I think, with the moon being in Sagittarius, squaring Mercury and Mars, plus Mercury's on top of Mars and Virgo, we're being just our anger and our frustrations will really be showing up in our communication right now. But Venus is ingressing into Libra. Soak in this Venus in Libra. Like, try to make connections, try to find peace, try to bring things together, try to find harmony, right? Super funny. A lot of people talked about last year when Venus was in Libra, making the square to everything in Capricorn, that was like really alleviating a lot of the Capricorn stuff. And I think with Venus in Libra starting to make that trine to Saturn Aquarius and Jupiter Aquarius, there's so much tension with people right now and with thoughts and everybody else. And I think as Venus goes into Libra, this is going to be about making connections. This is going to be about like building bridges. And so again, like the biggest thing here is if you have that inclination to enjoy things or be nicer or just kind of relax, like that's Venus. And you should lean into that because this is, one of the best transits that we get. And then after Venus leaves Libra, I don't want to say it all goes downhill from there, but it's, a little bumpy ride for the rest of the winter. Anyway, we get into Tuesday. And on Tuesday, really not that much is going on. We're just going to be having the moon square Neptune, which this kind of continues that theme that we kind of had on Monday, where the moon was originally squaring Mercury and Mars, and then the moon's going to make this square to Neptune. Yeah, the moon's going to be trining the sun, where we get that, Sagittarius moon and sun in Leo, right? There's all of this passion in the air and all of this like emotional, fiery feelings of, like, this is what I believe and this is what I feel and this is who I am and all of that jazz, right? But I think as the moon's in Sag squaring Neptune, not every vision that you have will be clear. Not every, there's going to be a lot of, I think, confusion on where to go and how to get things. Like you'll have the feelings, but how those feelings translate into where you want to take and where you want to go with it, that's going to be a little bit more difficult. So Tuesday's just a little bit weird. Really not much is going on Tuesday. But then we get to Wednesday. And then on Wednesday, we're going to have the moon ingress into Capricorn. As it ingresses into Capricorn, it will trine Mercury and Mars, and it will square Venus. And Mercury is going to be conjoining Mars. So kind of a complicated day. Like I talked about last week, you'll definitely hear something about the vaccine this day. Someone else, I just looked on Twitter, someone else said that this might be when they announce the third shot. That I can see that. I'm curious because I think no matter what ends up happening, I think these Mercury Mars things are going to be stuff about the vaccine. So I'm just really curious as to what it actually is going to be. But I also look at the moon being in Capricorn at first, making a square to Venus. Like, as for one, the moon's going to go into Capricorn, where it's like I'm a broken record with this stuff. Kind of feeling a little detached from feelings, kind of being a little bit more serious and sober about our emotions. And there's a place where that serves us, and there's a place where that doesn't serve us. And the moon in Capricorn is like, sometimes you just got to get a message across. Sometimes you have to, business is business, right? And I think as the moon squaring Venus in Libra, it's not going to be always easy to, the rule of law is very Capricorn and Libra. And sometimes the rule of law isn't always like fair or equal. And I think as the moon squares Venus, there's this disharmony. There's this kind of like, we're not feeling comfortable emotionally, so we're not going to be able to have that harmony. But I think that's because Mercury is on top of Mars. I think Mercury being about, communication, Mars being about fights, conflicts, anger, but Mercury and Mars are both in Virgo, where there's this exact, precise, specific stuff. I think there's a lot of mental clarity. And again, I can't emphasize on this has been the transit of the year that I've just been really thinking about, because Mercury will conjoin Mars in Virgo. They will conjoin in Libra, and they will conjoin in Scorpio for the next few months. So really pay attention to this Mercury Mars square, because this is going to show Mercury Mars conjunction, because it's going to show up quite a few times for the rest of the year. And I think, of course, look where Virgo is at in your chart. Look where Libra is at in your chart. Look where Scorpio is at in your chart. And I think as Mercury conjoins Mars in Virgo, there's this mental clarity, right? This is Mercury's home sign. This is also trining Uranus. This is like, like everything really, I think a lot of shit really comes together on Wednesday for everybody. I also think too, that's why I think the FDA will pass it, because then you'll start to see much more of like, the legislative process and all the other stuff go like much more, like there'll be a lot more answers for people where they'd had questions. And so I think there will be this moment of extreme mental clarity on a lot of positions, right? And the big thing though is, I think with Mercury on top of Mars, is that clarity isn't always like fun. It's kind of like it's kind of like if you have car problems, right? And you're like, okay, what's the problem with the car? What's the problem with the car? What's the problem with the car? And you finally, the mechanic comes back and you're like, and they know what the problem is, but it's not the problem. Like, it's a bad problem. You're like, fuck, like, at least you now know what the problem is and you know what the solution is, but it's not an easy fix, and it's not the best thing in the world. It's not like it's not a simple problem. I think Mercury and Mars and Virgo kind of contests to like the complexity of a situation, and how minuscule little things can really get. Like Mercury and Mars reminds me of Operation. If you guys remember that game where, you have to like kind of pick the little bones out of the guy without getting zapped. That's like Mercury and Mars and Virgo. Like you got to be really exact. You have to be really specific. And so, but also too, one little mess up and it's, bzz, it's a shock. It's an electrocution. And so, it's if you can get it, that's fine. That's great. But there's also, some consequences with that. And so I think also though, besides that mental clarity that's going to come on Wednesday, it's also, it's a little frustrating, I think, for like Mercury conjoining Mars is like hearing something that's a little frustrating, hearing something that's a little problematic. And again, I would just remember what goes on this day, because this is going to come up again with Libra. And this is what's interesting. This is what is so interesting to me, is Mercury conjoins Mars in Mercury's domicile, and then Mercury conjoins Mars in Mars's detriment, and then Mercury conjoins Mars in Mars's domicile. So there's this just weird, like, it's just, I don't know. That's so interesting to me. Anyway, we got to move on for that. That's Wednesday. I would really expect Wednesday a lot of shit to just really start to click. And also I would say try to calm down a little bit. I think Mercury conjoining Mars and Virgo, it's going to be really easy to, like, I think with Venus and Libra making this trine to Saturn, we should lean in towards peace, not choose violence, because Mercury and Mars is definitely choosing violence. And it's an interesting dichotomy, I think, that's going to play out. Anyway, let's go to what day are we on? Thursday. I meant to highlight this. On Thursday, the sun's going to go opposite Jupiter. Mercury's going to trine Uranus. The moon's going to be on Pluto, and then the moon will move into Aquarius later on that night. Thursday's a little weird, in my opinion. Thursday's also really setting the context for the full moon. As we get to Thursday, let's, kind of break it down. I want to talk first about the sun being opposite Jupiter. This is so important because now we're building up for that full moon that's going to be conjoining Jupiter. But I would also say, Jupiter rules faith. Jupiter rules belief. Jupiter rules what our knowledge, right? Higher knowledge. I always think, when I hear knowledge, I always think of the Tai Lopez commercial, Lamborghini knowledge. Jupiter rules integration, and Aquarius, and this is something that I've talked a lot about. Capricorn is like the rule book, the old way of doing things, and Aquarius, is we have to have structure, we have to have a set of rules, but we have to do it in this new and unique way that works for us, right? And I think with Jupiter and Aquarius, this is a big what have you fucking learned since January? It really comes down to this. Like, Jupiter has really Jupiter's flown through Aquarius and went into Pisces. We got a little taste of what the future has in store. Masks went away. We were doing other things, but now that's the past, and now we're living in the now. But Jupiter's now retrograde. What have you learned, and how are you integrating that into your life? Truly. Because Jupiter and Aquarius, Jupiter's been in Saturn sign. Like, what have we been learning? And Jupiter and Aquarius too, maybe we've been going into other areas of thought. Maybe we've been exploring different ideas, exploring different cultures, exploring different societies, right? That's this whole Saturn, Jupiter, and Aquarius. We're doing things differently. And as the sun's opposite Jupiter, how are you integrating that into your life? And how is that affecting you, like personally, like with your identity? And I think this is a big time to really look at, who you are and what you've learned. The other thing I would really put up is Mercury's trining Uranus at this time too. Mercury's going to be trining Uranus. Mercury's still conjoining Mars. There's a lot of breakthrough opportunities here where it just clicks. And it's not like oh my God, it all makes sense. But it's like okay, I get it now. Okay, it's clear enough to start making decisions. And I think as Mercury's trining Uranus, this, the way that we can communicate, the efficiency of which we can communicate, the rationale behind our thoughts, trining Uranus, being inventive, being, having a more liberating effect to it. I think it's exciting, but I also think it's a little intense. It's Mercury on top of Mars trining Uranus, which is very go, go, go. And I think the sun opposite Jupiter is very reflective of, like, how do I feel about all this? What does this all mean to me? But the other thing I want to bring up on Thursday, of course, is the moon's going to be on Pluto the whole day. So that will be interesting. It's pretty much void again, but the moon on Pluto, I think these Pluto transits are really, we're getting ready for the Pluto return of America. I plan on doing a video about this, but the whole economy thing that everyone's kind of waiting for, that's happening at the end of this year. I think the Pluto stuff is going to start as we get into winter, and as we start heading that way, it's going to start becoming more and more relevant. And now that we have planets in Libra and we're starting to head towards that way, you're going to start seeing it, I think, come up more and more. So I think as the moon's on Pluto, there's going to be this fear. It's going to be more this general anxiety, this uncertainty, I think, and that's just part of the game. And then the moon will move into Aquarius, right, later on that night, which really doesn't get important until we get to Friday, really. Let's go ahead and jump into Friday. I feel like I'm moving through this horoscope really fast. We get into Friday, and the moon's going to be in Aquarius. It will conjoin Saturn. The moon's going to also trine Venus, though, and Mars is going to also trine Uranus. So let's kind of look at that with the chart, because I feel like that sounded confusing, because I was like, what? But the moon's going to move into Aquarius, right? The moon is gaining in light. It is, illumination is happening, right? Think metaphysically for a moment, where when the moon's in the same sign as the sun, it's very dark outside. So the things that we don't see are more uncertain, right? When you have a full moon and you're lighting up the night, you're lighting up the dark, what you're usually not used to seeing becomes illuminated. You can see. So more things you're becoming aware of more things here. More things are becoming realized with full moons, right? This moon is going to be in Aquarius. First, it's going to trine Venus in Libra. So this is, for one, the moon's going to be in Aquarius. So we're talking about, like, being a little bit of outcasted, being a little on the fringes of things, seeing things through a different perspective, trying to get things to work, to have a system, to have, some type of walls, boundaries. Aquarius is just like Capricorn, except the the walls in Capricorn are literal. The walls in Aquarius are mental, or existential. But the moon is going to trine Venus in Libra, where there's this kind of like, okay, there's with Aquarius and Libra, there's a camaraderie in like being outcasted. And so I think the moon in Aquarius trining Venus and Libra is like, yeah, like where can we meet together, right? The moon's also hitting Saturn right here. So this is really like, there's this sense of bringing things together, but crystallizing those things, cementing those relationships, cementing those bonds. Again, I think Venus in Libra is really about connecting with people. And I know it sounds kind of funny because everyone's just fucking crazy right now. But I think as the moon's conjoining Saturn and trining Venus, there's this sense of like camaraderie of like, hey, like I relate to you. We have similar ideals. We have similar, disciplines. We're on the same side of the coin is how I would look at the moon on top of Saturn trining Venus in Libra. So I think this is really good for, look at where this rules in your chart. Maybe you're an Aquarius rising and Venus is in your 9th house and this is in your 1st house. So like a lot of your beliefs, with your, maybe you're learning more about astrology, getting more into astrology. It's, you're enjoying your spirituality and that's like really crystallizing a lot of your identity. You know what I mean? Like you just got to look at how this is really reflecting your chart, but this is really constructive. This is really good. This is cementing a lot of things. Yeah, this is Friday. So then also, the moon will trine Venus, conjoin Saturn, and then Mars is going to trine Uranus. It actually really happens like the next day. It's kind of a slower process. Actually, we'll kind of get to that. Anyway, let's actually just talk about this full moon, really. There we go. Where are we at? Saturday? Yeah. So, full moon in Aquarius, number 2, Mambo number 5. It's going to be conjoining Jupiter, and Venus will be trining Saturn the whole time. I love this full moon. Now, when we're building up to this, right, it actually really doesn't happen until like super, super late Saturday. So let's actually get to Saturday night. So like you'll see the full moon over the horizon. Like this is like sunset. Right at sunset, you'll see that moon come up. And it'll be exactly conjoining Jupiter. It looks so sexy. And the moon will hit Jupiter about 10 p.m. And so it's really technically into Sunday, but all of Saturday it builds up. This is why I brought this up, because you're like, Cameron, it's not on Saturday. And then also too, when we get really late into the evening on Saturday, that's when Venus is actually making that like trine to Saturn. Anyway, this full moon in Aquarius, number 2, on top of Jupiter. I think that's so appropriate that with the Jupiter Saturn, with both of them in Aquarius, that we get, a full moon on Saturn and a full moon on Jupiter. It's like we really see that dichotomy between what, Saturn in Aquarius is versus Jupiter in Aquarius is about. And I just, that full moon on Saturn it wasn't horrible, but it was really like, yeah, full moon on Saturn. Let's get a little realistic here. Let's be a little bit more mature. But I think this moon on Jupiter is really, again, Saturn is the greater malefic, but Jupiter is the greater benefic. And again, I really think this is about like, where can we come together with things? Where can we bring things together? I think because this is, Sun opposite Jupiter, there's going to be the sense of identifying you versus the other and me versus them and all of that kind of stuff, because that's just how it goes. But I also think a lot of this is realizing where you can integrate yourself into other areas, where you can put yourself into other modes of thought. And again, what have you learned while Jupiter's been in Aquarius? And I think too, this is like, we had that full moon on top of Saturn, which was like, okay, yeah, Saturn's still in Aquarius. And then we have this full moon in Jupiter. Like, it's like, okay, but what have you learned now? We've been in this for like 8 months. You know what I mean? I think reflect back to the AMC GameStop thing. That was when we had the full moon. That was the Jupiter Cazimi. Do you guys remember that? How crazy that was? And it was like, whoa, like, there was all this excitement and pizzazz. And I think this will be really similar. But what have you learned since then? What things were you introduced to back in January and February? I don't know why I have such a runny nose. What were introduced to back in January and February that now you've integrated into your life, that you reflect back into, what's different now? Um, and I think this is also too where like if the full moon on top of Saturn is realizing where the pessimism is, the full moon on top of Jupiter is realizing like where the hope is at, like where the optimism is at. Again, Mars is trining Uranus here, where there's a lot of this breakthrough mentality. Again, Mercury is on top of Mars, where there's frustration. There's frustration. There is maybe some resentment, but I also think Mars trining Uranus is very liberating, breakthrough. I think this full moon on top of Jupiter, and also too, Jupiter's retrograde. This isn't like there's hope and there's excitement and there's a future. This is like, again, this is what I've been trying to tell people, and I it's super funny. It's, as an astrologer, it's really funny when people tell you that you're fear mongering, and then you look at the news and you're like, I'm fear mongering, but the news is, it's all day long catastrophe, catastrophe, catastrophe. Anyway, this isn't about why I said that is I truly believe that at some, not, I don't think maybe not on a federal level, maybe, I don't know how it's going to be, because this is already happening in other parts of the world. There's going to probably be more lockdowns. There'll definitely be more lockdowns in some capacity. If 2020 was hard for you, like if the first lockdown was difficult, can you handle the second one? And I think, this is something that I just don't see enough people talking about right now. As human beings living through a certain era, right? We are having to overcome a lot of not only economic, social, political, strife. And we're having to navigate a world in a new path that we're not familiar with, nor are we, fully equipped to handle. And we're not, we don't have empathy right now for our own selves to go on this new path, right? And so I think this is just a really difficult, like, I think as humans during just experiencing an era of time, we've had it good for a long time, right? And so this is proposing new challenges that I think we, kind of speaking mostly to Americans, or at least Western countries, we haven't experienced this type of stuff before. And so what I want to say is, if lockdown number 1 was hard, I want to ask you, can you get down? And if there was another one, could you get through another one? Whether, and it doesn't matter if you're for or against it. That's besides the point. It's, what are you going to do to get through this time? There's a lot of confusing information out there. Most people are confused on what to believe because both sides are just as confusing as each other, and just as manipulative, in my opinion. However, I think right now you've got to I think this is what the full moon's about, is like, what have you learned? What do you believe in? What are you going to question? And what are you going to actually integrate into your life? And I think a lot of this full moon is, again, like, this is Jupiter retrograde. Like, I think this is going to be kind of a tough winter. And I think that we're in tough times in the sense of like how we operate with one another, how we operate within the society. And this is really the time to ask yourself, what do you have faith in? What do you believe in? And how are you going to integrate that? And I think a lot of this is about trusting. A lot of this is about trusting yourself. A lot about this is, making decisions on your own. And I think a lot of this is going, just because Jupiter's retrograde, I think that's just really the important thing here, is kind of going, okay, what has happened in these past 6 or 7 months? Where do I stand? Where do I feel about all of this? Because it's Leo and Aquarius, right? It's the self versus the group of people. And it's just very interesting how, that's just so I think just relevant to what's going on right now. But I also think with this too, this is in the future, as we go on for the next few months, Jupiter's going to get ready to station direct, which September, I think this Mercury retrograde in Libra is going to be really, really good. There is a nice little hopeful spot that we get during like September, October. But I think a lot of this is like, with Venus trining Saturn, with this moon top of Jupiter, where can we find some peace? Where can we go, okay, like, I've learned a certain way. Where can I have a little bit more hope? Where can I integrate this a little bit more, but still be like skeptical? Because I think Jupiter being retrograde is like, this isn't about like, oh, we're moving forward, everything's great. This is Jupiter retrograde. It's like, you have to remember that. Like, something I talk a lot about, like, you have to be, when Jupiter is retrograde, when Jupiter's direct, it introduces all these great things and you get all these new things. And as Jupiter's retrograde, you have to go, you have to remember to be grateful for all of that. You have to, learn about it. You have to understand it. And I think as Jupiter's retrograde, there's this kind of, especially being in Saturn's ruled sign, learning about responsibility, learning about, skepticism, about discipline, about boundaries. What does Jupiter learn through Saturn? This full moon, I really think, I just look at kind of the whole picture in general, right? And a lot of shit's really clicking by this full moon. Venus is trining Saturn. It's like we're mending relationships for one. We're bringing things together. Mercury's on top of Mars. Like it doesn't matter. Things are going to be clicking whether we're right or wrong. It's going to make sense to our brains, right? Whether we're right or wrong will be in the future something we deal with then. But I think this full moon on top of Jupiter, though, is, again, there's so many like little transits and little things that are like, a lot of things are getting realized here. A lot of things are kind of clicking. And I think that's going to change a lot of, people's perceptions of what's going on for them and what to do. So I really like this full moon. I'm really excited for it. We get into Sunday, and on Sunday, right after this full moon, the sun moves into Virgo and the moon moves into Pisces, where we then literally flip-flop energy literally overnight. So let's get into Sunday. The sun's going to go into Virgo, back to school. It's always back to school energy when the sun goes into Virgo, which, it's so funny. As an adult, I still love back to school. I hate school. I love learning, but I never liked school, but I love back to school energy. Like everyone's just like, get your shit together. Like maybe it's my Jupiter in Capricorn, but it's just like, get your shit together, this, that. Like it's so, I don't know. It's just something fun about it. And the moon's going to go into Pisces too. This is what's super interesting is like this full moon is at those end degrees of Aquarius and Leo, right? The sun goes into Virgo, moon goes into Pisces, where the sun's in Virgo. Like, okay, now that I know exactly what to do, how I think, how I feel, we have all this rational Virgo stuff. The moon's going to be in Pisces, where our feelings will be kind of astray, right? When we get into Monday, the moon will make some aspects, but I think as the moon initially goes into Pisces, this is that, okay, we can relax a little bit now, right? It's kind of like, now I don't want to say you can relax a little bit, but you can have a little bit of fun. It's kind of like when you go school shopping, you can be stressed about everything, but when you're actually shopping, you actually have to like go like, okay, do I want this? Is this what I want? How do I feel about this, right? Like it's a much more explorative thing. So I think on Sunday looks relaxing. Again, Venus is trining Saturn all day long here on Sunday. I don't know why I wrote that for Saturday. Anyway, it's happening on Sunday, but I'm assuming that it's also going to be a big thing for the full moon. And Venus is trining Saturn again. Just there's a lot of things connecting. There's a lot of things starting to make sense. This looks peaceful to me, which I think we just like as the world is burning, as the news would always say, that peace, like again, Venus is only in Libra for so long. This is Venus in its home sign. Squeeze that out. Get the most out of it, because Venus then goes into Scorpio after that and squares Saturn, which is going to suck. Venus will go into Sagittarius, which will be kind of cool, but it'll go over the South Node, which has its own problems. And then Venus will be in Capricorn for 5 months, retrograde on Pluto. What I'm trying to get here is this is it. Enjoy the peaceful energy while it's here. And from August, September, October, we do get a little bit of, when Venus is in Scorpio, get a little ucky, but for the most part, there's a lot of peace starting to really come into play. And I just can't emphasize, just like I said with Jupiter and Pisces, have fun, do shit. You're going to need it to get through this winter. You're going to need you're going to need to reflect on that. Like that's that Jupiter and Pisces stuff. Like I keep trying to tell people like, yeah, this winter is going to suck, but spring and summer of 2022 is really good. So you got to remember what is ahead of you in order to kind of get through this winter. That's why I'm kind of saying, learn what you can right here. See what you can right here. Integrate what you can right here. Because we're going into a really the more I do readings with clients, the more that I look at this, we're going into a really fucking interesting winter. And it's going to change a lot of shit for a lot of people. And it's going to, really set the stage for what 2022 has to offer. And I think it really starts, how the rest of this year is going to go. And I may sound like a broken record with this. Sorry, but, the August is going to be pretty cool. September's kind of okay. September's pretty cool for the most part. And then we get to the Mercury retrograde where a bunch of shit changes. And then Mercury stations direct around the middle of October. And then it was like all this stuff works out. And then we get to move forward. But then after that, it slowly goes down from there. And then it doesn't really start to go back up till February or March. So again, enjoy it while it lasts. You know what I mean? Not to say, again, the winter is going to be, some people will still, I mean, it's not every day is going to be that bad. You know, some days of lockdown were fun. You know what I mean? But not, of course, every day. And I think as we look at that winter, it'll be defined as a hard time. And that's not to say every day is going to be horrible or it is the end of the world. But there is going to be this, I think, reckoning that happens at the end of the year. We get to next week. You know, what's fun about next week is not a lot's going on. Mercury's going to go opposite Neptune, which in my opinion is good. That's like, okay, that'll be interesting in the news because you'll see a lot of people about dispelling misinformation, whatever that means. And there'll be this whole perception of that. But I think Mercury opposite Neptune will be really gaining clarity about what is and what is not real. This is when you understand the movie magic, right? Mercury and Virgo opposite Neptune and Pisces is like breaking down the movie magic on how to do it and how it's just all about perception. And then Mercury enters Libra. Mercury is in and out of Virgo, by the way. Like, we get like Mercury and Virgo for a whole 10 minutes, which this is Mercury in its domicile. This is, again, use that while you can too. Saturn's in domicile. Venus is in domicile. Mercury's in domicile. And the sun's in domicile too for a little bit of this week. So like, use that while you can. We only get all of that good, strong energy for so long. Anyway, that's what I got for you guys. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I always keep forgetting to mention this. I have monthly horoscopes coming out this week as well on my Patreon. So if you want to know, August horoscopes have been up since July, but September horoscopes are going to be up on my Patreon. So if you're interested in September horoscopes, go ahead and become a patron. So I want to leave off with that. Anyway, with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you next week.